You just let me know when. Okay. Welcome everyone to our 2024 public budget meeting. Thank you. We always begin our meetings with a land acknowledgement, and so I shall do so. The municipality of Tweed recognizes that our work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories, including the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize and respect the history, languages, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous peoples whose presence continues to enrich our communities. Miigwech. The purpose of this special meeting is to table and discuss the public and hear from our CAO on the public presentation of the 2024 municipal budget. Could I have a mover and a seconder for today's meeting, please? Thank you, Councillor Valiquette. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demarche. All in favor? Thank you. I just wanted to read a couple of questions. Just to sort of guide us in these deliberations. CAO Raybone will walk us through the entire presentation. We ask that questions be held until after the presentation, so please jot down your questions. At the end of her presentation, any residents that are present here or anyone who may be participating via Zoom will be asked to either come to the stand or raise their hands to have their question addressed. Please be brief with your question so that we can get as many in as we possibly can. It will be one question per resident until such time as everyone has had a chance to pose a question. Questions will be directed to CAO Raybone. And please note that the public budget meeting will have to finish by 6 p.m. because we then move it into our regular council meeting, which starts at that time. Okay, so fine. So disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. I'm going to take us right to then the public budget presentation. Gloria, first of all, I'd like to say you have come up with a wonderful presentation. A lot of information in there, and but very well laid out and easy to understand. So thank you very much to you and your team for doing that. I turn it over to you. Is this okay to turn it over to you now? Okay. I'm going to turn my mic off.
Okay. So we're going to get right into this so that way we have enough time for any questions that may come through the presentation. For our agenda, we'll just be going through a very brief understanding of budgets and taxes before we get into some of the significant impacts that council and staff had to deal with this budget season, as well as an overview of the tax, all of our departmental summaries, the capital projects that were proposed, and we'll end the presentation with a review of reserves and reserve funds. So under legislation, it's important to note that taxes are required to be set as a balanced budget, and there's two main parts to budgets. I'm just going to play a video here that explains this quite well, and it was created by the City of London just to help provide greater details. Once we get through the ad here.
Okay, I would like to help you understand how your municipality develops its budget. We always hear about them, and often this can feel like another language altogether. Before we get started, there's important information you should know. Ontario municipalities, like the municipality of MFOA, receive approximately 9% of all taxes collected, but are responsible for over 50% of the infrastructure. Let's start by looking at what the word budget means. Well, simply put, it's a planned, itemized summary of money that is coming into the municipality and how that money is spent for a specific period of time. It's very important to note that provincial government legislation in Ontario states money coming in equals money going out, also known as revenue equals expenditures or a balanced budget. The municipality of MFOA provides more than 60 services to the citizens of the municipality, so municipal council and administration always have to make difficult decisions to ensure this balancing takes place. There are two main components of the budget when looking at the money going out side of the scale. Operating pays for all the day-to-day activities of the corporation. This includes items such as salaries and wages, utilities, supplies, fuel, and insurance, just to name a few. The capital budget pays for all the new big investments or the rehabilitation of current assets under the municipality's control. So let's focus on how the municipality collects to pay for all these services. For every dollar that comes into the municipality, 64 cents comes from property taxes, 21 cents from grants and subsidies, and 15 cents from user fees and other sources. So, now we've learned what a budget is, how municipalities collect money, and how they spend it. Now let's take a look at how these pieces work together. Money comes in through property taxes, grants and subsidies, and user fees. The money collected is required for both the operating and capital budget. We've already talked about the operating budget, including day-to-day expenses, but it also includes money for funding capital budgets. The capital budget pays for all the new big investments or the rehabilitation of current assets under the municipality's control. This connection is made through three methods. The capital levy method reflects a pay-as-you-go approach. The reserve fund method, which reflects a planned save now, acquire, or use later approach, and the debt payment approach. Okay, so let's recap. 1. A budget is a plan for money coming in and money going out. There are two building blocks to the municipality's budget: operating and capital. 2. The operating budget is like you're paying your house bills to keep the lights on. Just like in a normal household, our bills go up with inflation. 3. The capital budget is like your major outlays: vehicles, house, renovations, etc. 4. Money comes in from three sources: property tax levy, user fees, and grants and subsidies. 5. Money coming in is used to deliver over 60 services to municipality residents. 6. Municipal council and administration, with the input of the public, decide how to best balance the municipal budget guided by provincial legislation. And that is how your municipality develops its budget.
We'll just go over a second video just to help explain, as there's often a lot of misunderstanding in the public as to how their property values and their assessments are tied into the tax that they pay.
This simple yet brilliant trick to heat your home in 90 seconds will save thousands of dollars on your heating.
Property taxes are based on your home's value. What you might not know is that an increase in your home's value doesn't necessarily mean your taxes will go up. To explain, let's take a look at how your property taxes are calculated. Imagine there's a town that only has 3 homes, and they're each worth a different amount. The total cost to provide all of the town's services is $1,200. This is collected through property taxes. Each homeowner pays property taxes based on their home's assessed value. So we take the total cost of services and divide it by the total property value. This tax rate is applied to all the houses to get enough money to pay for the town's services. Each homeowner pays according to the assessed value of their home, and every 4 years, the houses are reassessed. Let's say all 3 properties have gone up equally in value. The total cost of services hasn't changed, but the total property value has increased. When this happens, there will be a decrease in the tax rate. Now, when we apply that new rate on all the homes, everyone still pays the same. Now, let's say another 4 years has gone by, and these homes are reassessed. During this time, the house on the right gains more market value than the other 2. The total value of all the homes have increased, which means the town has to calculate a new tax rate. With this new tax rate, the first 2 homes will actually pay less than the home on the right that was reassessed at a higher value. Since the cost of services hasn't changed, the town doesn't need to collect more property taxes on the whole. However, since property taxes are based on a home's value, taxes for each individual home could potentially go up or down based on the rest of the homes. So, what happens when the cost to provide services goes up? Well, it means more property taxes need to be collected from every home and a new tax rate is calculated. To get the new rate, we take that amount that the town now needs and divide it by all of the property values. The new rate is applied to all the homes, and now everyone has to pay the new tax amount to continue to fund the town's services. So, let's review. 1. Property taxes are based on the assessed value of a home. If all assessments go up equally, everyone pays the same. 2. If all assessments do not go up equally, there's a redistribution of the tax. 3. If the town's cost to provide services increases, the municipality may choose to increase the tax rate. When this happens, everyone pays their share of that increase. And that explains the relationship between property value and property taxes.
So as a quick summary of those videos, property taxes are our main source of funding for most of the services that Municipality of Tweed provides. Under legislation, we are also required to collect property taxes on behalf of our upper tier, which is Hastings County, as well as the school boards, and there are 4 in our region. When we are setting our tax rates, council can only adjust the municipal one. They have no say in the other 2, but residents will be required to pay all 3. So just to give a brief timeline of how this budget cycle has gone, we did start with some basic direction from council back in June of 2023. And since then, we have had 4 budget meetings, the capital one in September, the first operating one in October, and 2 additional budget meetings in November and December, which were addressing reductions and where that could be done. Till today's public presentation and hopefully final approval with the tax rate projected to be passed in April after the county has finished their budget. There's as much as we're proposing a $5.4 million total tax levy for 2024, it's important to note that there's certain key things that make up the bulk of what the tax is paying for. Policing being one of our largest at just over $1 million. Insurance for us this year will be about $440,000. Gas and fuels, another $405,000, and so forth, as you can see down through the list there. Meaning that the majority of the services and costs that the municipality incurs are funded by only 1.1 million of the property tax that is brought in, as these few items make up the bulk of the costs. One of the things that kind of impacted the budget this year that made it a little more difficult was that when you look at the last 20 years of the budget, so from 2004 until 2024, our operating expenses increased 5.4 million to a total of 8.8 million a year. And that same time period, our taxes have only increased by 3.4 million. So that means only 63% of our operating expenses have actually been funded from property taxation over the period. The remaining amount was funded from small increases in user fees, but largely out of past savings, which is now no longer a sustainable process for us to maintain. The average tax per household for our region for 2023 was approximately $2,300. The average specific for Municipality of Tweed in 2023 was $1,500. With the 2024 proposed tax increase, it would be increasing that to $1,791, which is still less than the average by about $500. When we're looking at the total tax increase that has been out there, it's at 17.8%. It's important to note that of that, 9.6% is related specifically to funding debt payments and past deficits that have been recognized that we now need to deal with. And then another 7.13% relates to a plow that's already been ordered, and we're about 14 months into the ordering process and should be arriving shortly. And we needed to still fund another $330,000 of that purchase. So the total of just those 2 items alone is 16.73%. So all other services and operations of the municipality raised only the remaining 1.07% of the tax rate increase. Some of the other factors that many in the community should be aware of is that Our 2022 bridge inspection reports that we get done every 2 years show that out of our 52 bridges, 32 of them require significant rehabilitation or replacement within the next 10 years, with a total of 41 needing work, totaling approximately $27 million. If we were to do this evenly, that's 2.7 million a year, or almost half of the annual tax that we're collecting each year on top of the operating amounts that we do. Many other capital areas are also seeing similar type concerns, as a lot of our assets are getting older. So when we look at the assessments, as was discussed in some of those videos, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, or MPAC, is the one who's actually responsible for setting all assessments for all the properties. They have, again, the province has ordered that MPAC has to keep the values the same as they were, increased to in 2020, which is based off of the 2016 values of the properties. So the only increase that we had was about 1%, or 7 million, which relates specifically to construction and renovation throughout the year. So when you look at over the years, 2020 was the last time that MPAC was allowed to increase assessments to match market values. And you can see the drastic difference between 2019 to 20 versus each year between 20 and 24. So the total 2024 tax levy that we are looking at is $5,449,000 approximately, which is an increase of about $823,000. So this is an approximate impact for every $100,000 of assessment of about $121. The average assessed home within our municipality is approximately $172,000. So the average home will be seeing an increase of about $208, or just less than $18 a month for the year of 2024. So historically, as was mentioned, our tax rates the blue section relates to the municipal portion. The yellow or gold section relates to Hastings County, and the green is the education. The province has kept the education tax rate the same. At this point, we do not know what Hastings County rate is, as they have not finished their budgeting process. So that number there is just last year's, but it is subject to change. For every $100 that you do pay to the municipality, as a reminder, it does cover Hastings County as well as the school boards, in addition to the municipality of Tweed. So we only get to keep about $62 out of every 100 that you pay to us. $23 goes to Hastings County, and $14 goes to the school boards. When you compare that to our neighbors, their amounts that they get to keep range anywhere from $63 to $70 out of every 100 collected. For each $1,000 that you pay in municipal portion only, you do receive, it's broken down across the services. The majority of the costs do go towards roads, about $622. Policing cost about $192 out of that 1,000. Administration's $218. Parks are about $71, libraries about $31, and so forth. So for every 1,000 that you pay in municipal portion only, this is the services that you are getting for those. And looking at it in a different method, you can see the breakdown here, as you did see there was 2 negative lines on the previous page, which relate to special grants or one-time funding that is applied to all departments, specifically the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, or also known as OMPF, which is a provincial grant with no strings attached to it. So we can apply it to whatever department we need. When we look at our property tax per household, the solid line there is the average for 2023 of our comparators. And you will see that we were substantially lower than many of our neighbors. And even with our 2024 proposed increase, it will be bringing us in line to what Marmora Lake was for 2023. In addition to the regular taxation that is collected, we also collect streetlight charges, specifically for those who are living in areas serviced specifically by streetlights. So not everyone pays that fee. We also do the same with curbside collection. So only those within the village actually pay for the curbside fee. The final rates of that will be passed when we go to pass the tax rate bylaw. One thing that's often misunderstood, or there's misinformation out there, is that not everyone in the municipality pays the curbside collection, but everybody does pay the bag tags. So even if the people in the village are paying approximately $112 a year for the curbside collection, they also still have to pay for a bag tag for every bag that is collected. The revenues from the bag tags are there to help cover the costs of the landfill operations, as well as being set aside for future closure of the landfills, whereas the curbside special tax is only to cover the cost of the actual contracted services for pickup. In July of 2024, we are proposing that the quarterly water charges will be increased to $115.73 and the sewer one up to $144.66. This increase is largely because we have significant capital that needs to be addressed in the coming years. The total replacement cost of our water and sewer infrastructure is just less than $35 million in today's estimates. And with about 10 million of that needs to be done in the next 10 years. With our reserves at the end of 2023, around 411,000, we have quite the distance that we need to go over the next few years to be able to address these needs in order to maintain water and sewer services. Out of the water rates, basically we collect $133,000 every year towards capital, and out of the sewer, about just less than 200,000 every year to go towards these capital needs with the new rates that we have established. As a reminder, taxes do not fund anything in water and sewer rates do not fund anything that taxes are supposed to fund. They are operated and treated separately and tracked separately. When we look at our water rate compared to some of our neighbors for 2023, even with our increase proposed starting in July, it is still below a lot of our comparators. And with the sewer rates, it brings us up in line with a lot of our comparators other than Bancroft. With the budget issues and constraints that we had to deal with this year, Council completed a very detailed review of all of our user fees, and there were several proposed changes that are being brought forward for bylaw review later tonight at the regular Council meeting. Some of the key items to note would be marriage licenses will be increased from $100 to $200. We're increasing the costs for zoning amendments and minor variance fees. We also have established a new fee for planning files that require a recirculation. So any that end up having to have multiple public meetings will have to pay $250 for each public meeting to cover the costs of all the additional mailings. We introduced also this year fees for site plan review and subdivision review, as these do take significant time of staff, departments, and potentially consultants in order to review the files to ensure they're appropriate. Tax sales administration fees are also being increased for the first time since 1998. The other increases that will affect a lot of people will be dog tags, kennel licenses, and burn permits are being increased as well. Many of the recreation areas, including the arena, soccer field, baseball diamonds, all had some increases to them. The key ones that many people want to know is prime time, and for tournaments, we'll have an hourly arena rate of $180 plus HST, starting with the September season of 2024. Non-prime time, minor hockey, and figure skating hourly rates will increase to $120 plus HST. We've also created some new fees in the transportation department to help cover the cost of completing the applications that come through. So our municipal consent, when hydro poles or natural gas lines or any other services are wanting to be dug into our road allowances, we will now be charging $500 for every application, and we'll also be charging $100 for every wide load permit. Bag tag fees will be increasing to $3 per bag. Which has affected the oversized bag fee being increased to $6. We'll be starting to charge $1 per tire with no rim. For collection, we are doing one bag tag fee per load of brush starting with this year. And bulk items has also increased to $187.42 per ton. So now we're going to get into some of the departmental overview. We'll start with general government, which consists of the activities of council, general financial and administration management, so mostly the administration building. This is also the area in which the OMPF that I referenced earlier is currently sitting, and you can see that 2 million in the middle of the screen there under government transfers. The total revenues projected for 2024 are 2,587,000. The decrease there being in relation to the phase-in that we're doing of no longer having a working capital reserve and the tax relief program that we had implemented during COVID. And so we're bringing in another 230,000 of that tax impact this year, with the remaining amount in future year. The start of the expenses for general government, you'll see on this page, the salaries, materials, and contracted services. Most of the decrease in materials is largely due to the savings that we were able to obtain in insurance this year with changing companies. The increase in our contracted services largely has to do with a pay equity consultant that will be engaged during the year for approximately $20,000, and our projection of costs for the Hannah Street studies in order to acquire that land. The other expenses in general government, you'll see there's a new line here for repayment of 2022 deficit. So at the end of 2022, we did end the year with a $344,000 deficit, largely due to fuel and gas prices that year, which were drastically different than originally expected. The maintenance cost on repairs for vehicles and equipment were substantially over budget, as well as some contracted winter maintenance for the village streets was over budget. So council during the December budget meeting decided to fund approximately 75,000 of that during 2023, with the remaining amount to be funded equally over the next 3 years of the remaining amount of their term, bringing us to total expenses of just less than 1.4 million. Off of the revenues that we had leaves us with just less than 1.2 million available to help fund other departments and reduce the taxes for them. In protection services, this is where we have our fire, our police, bylaw enforcement, animal control, and similar type services. Our total revenues we're expecting to increase to 134,000. Some of this relates to some of the new fees or the increased fees that we have made changes on the user fees. The rest is in relation to some items in the fire department that the items were delayed in delivery, and the budget was approved to be moved forward to 2023 or 2024. So you'll see the transfer from reserves there, offset by the increases in the expenses on this page. Overall, we're expecting total expenses to be about 1.8 million for protection services. And so when we take that away from the revenues that we're expecting, that leaves 1.7 million to be funded from OMPF or from taxes. It's also important to note that our policing costs also increased just less than $32,000 for the year 2024. So the net operating cost of fire services per property is about $106. For police, it's about $219. The operating cost of our animal control per every dog tag is about $74 in comparison to the new fee that will be established of $25. Our operating cost of livestock evaluation is about $107. And as a reminder, the province only refunds us $50 per claim. The net operating cost of our bylaw enforcement is about $48 per hour of service received, and our conservation authority is approximately just less than $19 per property. Then we get into our transportation services, which includes all of our roads, bridges, aggregate, and winter control activities. You can see here that we did expect some increases in user fees with some of the new revenues that we've established. Offset a little bit by, in 2023, we finally were able to open our Esker pit, and we were able to pull from reserves amounts that were unspent in 2020 due to the delay in actually getting approval for our license. And so those were used to open the pit in 2023. The expenses for these departments, you can see on this page, the biggest change that brought it up to about 2.8 million in expenses is we do have new debt with the Joe Allure Bridge, as well as McClellan Street and Pomeroy Avenue Road projects. So that's about 204,000 there. And so that's the bulk of the increase in the roads department. When you take away that 2.8 million from the revenues, we will be seeing a department deficit of 2.7 million, which will be funded by taxes or OMPF. Then we get into water and sewer. As a reminder, these do not have any impact on the tax rate. We are expecting the revenues to increase due to the increase in the rates. So we're expecting it to go up to just over $1 million. The expenses for the year are largely increasing due to additional loans that were acquired for 2023 capital projects, which was about a $62,000 increase. So we are expecting operating surpluses to be able to set aside for capital needs of about $349,000 for water and sewer together. The sewer operating costs per residential connection is approximately $374 per year, and the water operating cost only per residential connection is about $330 per year. Our other environmental services includes the landfill and our recycling costs. You will see here that there is an increase in the user fees and the revenues here largely to do with the increase in the bag tags, new fees for tires and brush, as well as the increase for bulk. The expenses are expected to increase to $745,000. Part of this has to do with the increase in our recycling costs, which was about $25,000. And we are also increased our transfers to reserves with the increase in the bag tag fees. Half of those increases, projected to be about $30,000, was to be set aside into the bag tag reserve fund to help fund the cost of closures of our landfills. In recreation and culture, this covers all of our parks, arenas, splash pad, pool, library, and other recreation facilities. And during 2023 budget, it also included the Tweed Oil Kings up until the date of that team being sold. You will see there that the revenues have a small increase expected. Some of that increase is related to the user fees being increased and offset by the revenues that we would no longer be seeing because of not having the Oil Kings team, which those decreases are offset by the decreases in the expenses, which you'll see on this page is largely the change that we see from 2023 total expense budget of $1,098,000 down to $1,035,000. There is additional debt that's expecting to be paid this year because of our Queensborough Hall project, which is expected to be about $15,000. So the amount that needs to be funded by OMPF and taxes for the recreation departments is $807,000. The net operating costs for every acre of park space that we provide is approximately $9,600. The operating costs of the arena per hour of operation is $223. So when you subtract off the user fees and the charges that we give to the individuals who are renting the ice, it brings it down to only a $97 per hour of operation impact on the tax. The net operating cost of all other recreation services per property is $57 for 2024. When we look at planning and development, this includes our community development, economic development, as well as planning and zoning activities. You will see that the revenues are expected to decrease just a little, although there was some increases in zoning and planning fees. With the switch from farm to table to Taste of Tweed, the farm to table is a much larger event that happens once every other year or once every 3 years. And the Taste of Tweed is a smaller event, and so it generates less revenues, but it also has less expenses. When we look over at the expenses, they only changed from 2023 to 2024 by about $1,800 in total. And so although we see some savings in the materials with the switch from farm to table to Taste of Tweed, we do have some of that offset and other cost increases throughout the year. The total of those departments that are to be funded from OMPF and taxes is $269,000. So the net operating cost for the community development per property is about $58, and the net operating cost per planning file is $1,000 before any appeals or secondary distribution of notices if more than one public meeting is required. So when we summarize all this, you can see that our total operating property tax needs has increased from 3.9 million to 4.5 million. And the remaining increases are largely due to capital. When we look at our operating revenue, 54% is being brought in from our taxes, and then grants are funding 20%, with user fees funding just less than 19%. The expenses, as is comparable with most municipalities, the bulk of it is in our roads and transportation, so 31%, followed closely by protection services with policing and fire at about 21%, and about 16% for environmental services, so our landfill. When we start looking at the capital, we thought we would show this in a slightly different way so that you could see all the projects and which ones actually impact taxes. So in the administration department, most of the capital items are being funded from reserves, other than the actual plans and studies that we have been authorized, if the budget passes, to proceed with in order to help us get development charges established and to be ready for future grants. So we will be completing a master recreation plan, roads needs study, water needs study, as well as sewer needs study, which are projected to be approximately 90,000, which will be funded from taxes. In the fire capital budget, all projects that have been proposed will be either done in-house or will be funded from reserves and have no tax impact. In our roads department, although we are projecting about 2.5 million in total costs, the tax amount is only about 398,000. And it's important to note that the $2 million for the George Street and James Street and then Quinns Lane will only proceed if we are able to identify a funding source for that amount. Going on to water and sewer, again, these ones do not impact taxes. And similar to the road piece, the George Street and James Street South for both water and sewer will only proceed if we can find a funding source to help with those. Otherwise, the other items are funded out of the water and sewer reserves. In recreation, there are several projects that are being proposed. Some are dependent on finding other capital sources or other funding sources, such as the Merrill Bank Canteen engineering costs, as well as the community center preliminary conceptual work, and the pool heater. Though we're looking at just less than 620,000 of capital costs for the recreation, only 12,000 is actually impacting taxation. And that is comparable to prior years relating to the 4 Hamlet centers. In community development, we are looking at 2 small projects, the hydrant painting, which happens every year, as well as adjusting our electronic sign to be able to handle banners, which would total $5,000 impact on taxes. So when we look at the total capital needs, comparable with most municipalities, the bulk of it is in transportation and water and sewer. And a lot of those amounts are based on finding adequate funding sources. The capital funding for the projects, as noted, 2.8 million is dependent on finding alternate funding sources, with 862,000 coming from reserves and only 505,000 coming from taxation. This is a new chart that we wanted to show everyone this year so that they can understand what council has to take into consideration when they are doing their budgets. This is the next projected 10 years of capital needs. As you can see, in 2024, we're projecting 4.5 million. But in some of the years where we're looking at, say, 2030, we're looking at nearly $19 million and $13 million in 2031. And a lot of this has to do with our bridges, roads, and water and sewer projects that are coming down the line. So this is a significant pressure that council has to consider when they are making decisions during budget time. And then finally, we'll end the presentation with just a quick review of reserves and reserve funds. As a reminder, reserves is basically setting aside a certain amount of your surplus for specific purposes, typically for future capital needs. So it's basically your savings. A reserve fund is similar, except it has a specific asset, so either cash or investments tied specifically to it, and can only be established by bylaw. The two reserve funds that we have right now is for our bag tags, for the future closure of the landfills, as well as our aggregate pits for the future closure of the aggregate pits that we do have licensed. Obligatory reserve funds are a little different in that they are established by provincial or federal legislation, and they are restricted as to how they can be spent and when. And if you do not follow the rules, you will be required to pay these back to the federal or provincial governments. And the two that we have relate to federal gas tax as well as parkland fees. So that is the sum of the budget presentation, and we will now be taking any questions and answers from anyone in the room as well as anyone through Zoom.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Yes, there are no questions from the chambers. Are there any questions, Gloria, that you see from external?
At this time, I see no questions through Zoom, but we can wait. As we
Can-
do have some time, I will leave it open for at least 5 more minutes if you still wish to enter your questions.
Okay, thank you. Andre, did you get a copy of the budget?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have it on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
okay. Well, we will just, I'll just turn this off and we'll just wait for a couple of minutes. Please.
One thing that we haven't talked about is the capital projects that we've completed over the past 20 years. And it was mentioned that we need, work required on 32 bridges approximately. We have, over the past 20 years, I think we replaced 20 or 16 or 17 bridges and large culverts. Repaired a couple bridges. We've done major infrastructure work in the village. We've done road work out in the rural areas, like and all of this over the past 18 years, we shared funding. Now we're in a predicament where we don't have the funding. We're not getting the funding from the government. I guess hindsight is a great thing, but it's too bad we couldn't see it ahead of time. But now we're in a predicament. We need to substantially adjust the way we do business from this time forward. And it's a shame that we make note of all these deficiencies and we get no help. So I would suggest, and I've said many times that we've got 444 municipalities in Ontario. We need to be 444 strong. We need to fight this battle shoulder to shoulder. Make it understood that small town Ontario is in a predicament, as well as the big cities. But we need to put a plan in place where we can consistently move forward without having to worry about this kind of thing.
Thank you for raising that, because in our presentation to the Minister of Infrastructure, Minister Surma, we cite exactly what you were just referring. Since 2007, we received funding largely from this third type programming of 24.5 million, to which we added, the municipality, when I say we, that's, previous councils added 20.1 million. So that's like 40 almost $45 million worth of upgrades and whatnot. I think the other thing that's important to know, typically when this was done back then, it was done on an as-needed basis as it arrived.
Yeah.
Since recently, the government has asked us to come up with asset management plans. And that's when we started realizing what we had stored in front of us. We didn't never realize that before, councils. So and I think what is interesting is when we talk about what we have coming down that pipeline, which are the things that Gloria just described, and especially when she was looking at right up to 2031, 2032, a significant amount of money. And according to the master management plan, which we have to abide by according to the provincial government, is we now have to put in, I think it's $11.1 million a year into reserves, in addition to covering all of our operating, okay, and any capital projects that we're working on at that time. So as you've mentioned, there's just no way that we can do this, and we need assistance. I'm going to be going, and I talk about it in my my mayor's remarks for the council meeting afterwards. But what we're going to need to do, and I'm going to go into more detail on how we received at Roma when we made our delegations. But that will be coming later. There's too much right now to focus on. But thank you very much for raising that. Any other word out there?
There are still no questions on the floor.
Okay, go ahead, Jamie, Deputy Mayor.
Mayor, just furthering on Councillor Fleeler, up till a couple of years ago, like you both said, the third funding was there. And a big portion of this predicament we find ourselves in today is repayment of debt that we honestly probably wouldn't have needed to do if we didn't have to do it all on our own. So all the infrastructure cost is on our shoulders now. We've incurred some debt. Now those debts have to be repaid. And that's a good chunk of this heart-wrenching position we find ourselves in today. So I think that as Councillor Fleeler has asserted to, that it's a lot of municipalities are going to find themselves in the same predicament, if not they are now, and that they need to band together and just make them heard and be loud.
I think the first, we had debt way back, and then we got out of it. And then the latest amount of debt that was incurred recently was under the last council. And that was because of the lagoon. And that was a wise investment. That was over $4 million, of which we received 2.1 million in grants. So that really helps. And then we had $1 million, you guys had $1 million in reserves that you pulled out to put towards it. So that really helped. So that meant we had to incur debt of 2.2 million. And that was good, because what does that do? That allows us to bring 800 homes to market within the village. And when you can bring 800 homes to market in the village, that means we're going to get more taxes. So that's going to help us. So that's a wise investment. Going back to what Deputy Mayor Demarche just said, last year we had to borrow about $4 million because we had two major projects that we had to do. There was the bridge, the Allure Bridge. There was Pomeroy and McClellan, and then there was the Queensborough Hall. And so we typically would look for a third, and a third, but we didn't get anything. So we had to front the full over 4 million ourselves, and that kills a small rural municipality like ourselves. So then that was the Pomeroy and McClellan project was typically to have been a 2-year initiative, but the contractor came to us and said, we're trying to keep all our people employed. If you'll do it all in 1 year, we'll reduce the cost by almost $1 million. And so we said, well, if we can reduce the cost by $1 million and save that much from taxpayers, or even us having to borrow, which is probably what 20% in tax revenues, we said, okay, we'll do it. And what we'll do is we'll borrow our OCIF and our gas tax money from 2024 to put towards that, to keep the cost down even more. And so that, although we had to do it and we had to borrow the money as much as we didn't want to, we had no choice. So that's why we borrowed there. So then when you start looking at those two debt limits, all of a sudden now we're getting close to our maximum debt that we can incur. So we don't really want to do too much more borrowing in that regard, because as we know here, when we borrow from our reserves, we have to pay it back. And so that restricts the current council and future councils. And then if you have debt and it's over 25 years, you're also restricting yourself because you got to pay back your debt during that period. And also you're restricting future councils. So when we looked at 2024 and we were saying to everybody, put in what you want, and we came up with a 54.4 budget, and everybody's going, oh my God. Well, we can't lose sight of the fact that the reason why it was high is because we took OCIF and gas tax money from 2024 and put it towards the project of 2023. So that's why we decided to take out all of the capital expenditures that we were going to do, because we had actually already used the money that we would normally have put towards that. So then that started bringing us down, and we got to 24, and then we got down to 20, and then we got down finally to actually about 15.8%. And then there was an operating deficit from the previous council that we had to deal with, and that was only because of inflation and COVID. But inflation was the key thing there; it killed everything. And so that's why we've decided as a council here to pay that back, and we're going to spread it over the next 3 years, and that added the extra 2% basically to what we're looking at today. So, but I guess where we struggle here as a municipality, as a council, and as a team out there who keep us on track is that we have significant costs coming down the pipeline. And we are required by the province to put money away for it. And we can't do it, even if our taxes were at the level where I think they should be. And even if our reserves were up and nice and healthy right now, that if the government should ever come back with a third and a third and a third, we have our third that we can pull it out to work on a project. There is no way that this municipality could ever, every year, put away an additional 11.1 million. Absolutely no way. This was the purpose of our meeting with the Minister of Infrastructure, to lay it on the line. I'm not going to go into the response. Let's just say we were all pretty, well, I can't use that word. We were all pretty upset, and I'm going to go into more detail of that when I write a position paper on it. But anyway, they know what we are up against. And as Deputy Mayor DeMarsh has just said, we are not the only small rural municipality. Every municipality in this, in Hastings County, and every municipality to our neighbors in other counties, the small rural communities, 10,000 and less, are all experiencing this. And as you've said, we got to take the fight back to them, but we don't do it individually. We have to do it all together because there is absolutely no way that we can do this. And then when you think of it, we ask for some assistance and we get told no. And then all of a sudden, but how can you tell us no when you will give Toronto $1.5 billion, 500 million a year for the next 3 years to help you pay your operating deficit? But no, municipality Tweed, we can't give you a dime. How about you take back a bridge or two, or take Marlbank or a road for us? No, we cannot give you a dime to help with those infrastructure initiatives, but we will take back the Don Valley and we will take back the Gardiner Expressway from Toronto so that they don't have to worry about those expenditures anymore, but I can't give you a dime. Well, I tell you, you're good. We're going to be getting our dime, and I'm going to make damn well sure of it. Anyway,
And Mayor, just a couple of other points since after COVID too, like a plow truck, when I started here, was $250,000. Now that same truck is $400,000. A fire truck used to be, 420,000. Now we're looking at 815,000 for a fire truck. Things are out of this world for increased cost. So we're getting reduced revenues, no help for a third on infrastructure, and inflationary costs on to boot. So it's a double kick when you're down. I don't see how, at the rate that we're being plummeted here, that average people can survive. This has gave me more than one sleepless night.
yes, Councillor Palmatier.
Nobody here takes this lightly. Nobody here wants to do this to our neighbors, to our friends, to family members, but we're trying to keep this municipality viable. I think something that gets lost is that your property taxes look unattainable, out of reach, just too expensive overall. Now, if you look at your gross income as an individual and you look at your tax load that is paid out of that income, the municipality takes the smallest portion. Yet we're expected to bear the biggest burden. We do those things that you use in your daily life, such as your road infrastructure and maintaining it, your policing. And I think that those other things, policing and education, people assume that the province covers. And they are things the province has handed off. That's why you don't hear too many excuses from the province. We are doing the best we can, and nobody here wants to do this, but we know that we have to do it to keep this municipality moving forward and viable, not only for the next few years to come, but hopefully generations to come.
And 3 more minutes, okay, and then, do we have to keep going, or can we, okay, I'm just gonna, say one last thing. You know, this, you're gonna see this coming down everywhere. Oh, I say that later, I don't need to say it now. We're good, okay. Let's wrap, oh, let me go back to my,
Did we just get some? Questions are over.
We just received a question. It says, I missed the operating deficit from the previous council. Could you please explain? An excellent presentation. You have explained everything. Thank you. In regards to the deficit, that was in relation to 2022's operating. We, at the end of the year, or when we first started the budget for that year, we were budgeting for things like gas and diesel, with prices sitting at about $1.20. And in that year, they jumped up over $1.70. And so we ended up being over budget in those type of items, as well as repairs and maintenance on our vehicles and equipment. So we had about $127,000 over on diesel and fuel cost, $123,000 over in maintenance, approximately $75,000 over in our contracted snow plowing contract. And so those plus a few other small items brought us to a $344,000 deficit, which we now need to start paying back, which we couldn't address in 2023 as we did not know the final number, as the audit had not yet been completed.
thank you, Gloria.
So
Sorry,
before-
I booted
Before
out.
we adjourn, Mr. Mayor, we do need a resolution to approve the budget presentation as provided and to approve the presentation of the budget bylaws at the regular meeting.
Okay, sorry, I just got booted out, so I have to go back to everything. Okay. So. Could I have a mover and a seconder to table the budget presentation? Sorry, I should have done that earlier. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Palmetier. Thank you, Councillor Valley-Cat. Be it resolved that council approve the 2024 public budget presentation as provided by the CEO Treasurer, and further that council approve the presentation of the appropriate bylaws to adopt the 2024 municipal budget for passing at the January 2024 regular council meeting. All in favor? Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn today's meeting, please? Thank you, Councillor Palmetier. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demarche. All in favor? Be it resolved that council adjourn the meeting at 6 p.m. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, we'll start this next one. We'll just take 1 minute if anybody has to go to the bathroom, and then